What if I told you there's a country so vast that driving from one end to the other would take you through six different time zones, and yet more than 80% of its population is squeezed into a narrow strip along a single border? What if that same country holds more freshwater lakes than the rest of the planet combined, has a coastline so long it might genuinely never end, and hides landscapes so strange that scientists still study how the Earth itself was born there? By the time this ends, you'll understand why Canada isn't just a country. It's a puzzle written in stone, ice, and water, and today we're solving it piece by piece. Stick with me until the final minute, because the last place on this list will completely change how you see this country. And hey, if you love hidden geography and forgotten history, this channel is exactly where you want to be. Consider hitting that follow button now, because you won't want to miss what comes next. Let's start with the name itself, because even that hides a secret. Canada comes from the indigenous word Kanata, which simply means village or settlement, a humble word for a country that would eventually become the second largest landmass on Earth. Spanning six time zones, its coastline stretches farther than any other nation's, so long that mapping it completely feels almost impossible. And scattered across its surface are more than 2 million lakes, more than every other country combined. Water isn't just scenery here, it's identity, carved into the land itself. But here's where it gets strange. Despite all that space, Canadians cluster together. Over 80% of the population lives within just 150 kilometers of the United States border, which happens to be the longest undefended border on the planet, stretching a staggering 8,891 kilometers. Head north from that crowded edge, though, and everything changes. The land turns wild, remote, almost otherworldly. In Churchill, Manitoba, polar bears wander freely through town, earning it the nickname the polar bear capital of the world. Scattered across the Arctic tundra stand in Nuksuk, ancient stone figures once used by indigenous peoples to navigate landscapes with no roads, no signs, nothing but endless white. And despite this rugged, disciplined image, Canadians have a secret weakness. This nation produces 71% of the world's maple syrup, and somehow still finds room to eat more donuts per capita than any country on Earth. Contradiction seems to be Canada's favorite language, but that's just the introduction. What's coming next is where things get genuinely unbelievable. Deep in British Columbia's Wells Gray Provincial Park hides a waterfall most tourists never even hear about. Helmkin Falls plunges 141 meters down, carved by glaciers over 200,000 years ago, slicing straight through ancient volcanic rock to form a canyon that feels almost forgotten by time. Because it's so far off the beaten path, you can stand there in total silence, surrounded only by dense forest and wildlife, and feel like you've discovered something no one else has. Now compare that to the opposite extreme. Niagara Falls isn't quiet. It isn't hidden. It's raw, thunderous power on full display, drawing millions of visitors every single year. But before it became a photo opportunity, the Iroquois considered it sacred ground. The falls themselves were formed 12,000 years ago by melting glaciers, and even now, they're still moving, eroding roughly 1 foot every single year. By the late 1800s, Niagara became one of the first places on Earth to generate hydroelectric power, changing how humanity thought about energy forever. Today, it straddles the border between Canada and the United States, made up of three separate falls: Horseshoe, American, and Bridal Veil, together pouring over 3,000 tons of water every single second. You can get close enough to feel the spray on the Maid of the Mist boat tour, or walk through tunnels carved behind the falling water itself. At night, colored lights transform the mist into something almost alien. And in winter, the entire scene freezes into a crystalline wonderland of icicles and frost. But even this isn't the most surprising stop on our journey. Not even close. Just a short detour away lies the Okanagan Valley, and here's the twist. This feels less like Canada and more like the Mediterranean. Warm enough to support over 200 wineries, including the region's famous ice wine, the valley stretches around Okanagan Lake for 135 kilometers of shimmering water framed by vineyards and mountains. But nearby, something far stranger waits. Spotted Lake, near Osoyoos, is a mineral-rich pool that transforms in the summer heat, forming surreal, almost unnatural patterns across its surface. Even in Canada's most relaxed valley, nature still finds a way to unsettle you. Push further into the Thompson Valley and the scenery flips again, this time into semi-arid grasslands and golden hills, home to the Secwepemc people for thousands of years and still shelter to wild bighorn sheep. Where the North and South Thompson rivers meet sits Kamloops, once a critical stop on the Canadian Pacific Railway and deeply tied to the fur trade era that shaped this entire region. The Trans-Canada Highway itself carves through these mountains and valleys, at its most breathtaking during sunset, while the quieter Caribou Highway kicks up dust along gravel backroads, revealing a side of British Columbia most tourists never see. And then, everything changes again. The Canadian Rockies aren't just mountains. They're closer to nature's own workshop, spanning Alberta and British Columbia with jagged peaks, endless glaciers, and forests that seem to stretch into infinity. Banff National Park, established in 1885 as Canada's very first national park, earns its reputation as the crown jewel of the Rockies. Picture the turquoise waters of Lake Louise and Moraine Lake reflecting snow-capped peaks so perfectly it looks artificial. The Banff Springs Hotel, a literal castle built into the mountains, has welcomed travelers for generations. Lake Minnewanka has held deep spiritual significance for Indigenous peoples for centuries, and the wildlife here doesn't hide. Grizzly bears, elk, and bighorn sheep move freely through the landscape. Ride the Banff Gondola up Sulphur Mountain, and you'll see sedimentary cliffs revealing millions of years of Earth's history written directly into the rock. But this is only the beginning of the Rockies' secrets. Jasper National Park, the largest in the entire range, feels wilder, more untouched than its famous neighbor. Its centerpiece, the Athabasca Glacier, is part of the massive Columbia ice field, one of the largest ice fields in North America, and it's shrinking every single year because of climate change. You can actually walk on it during guided tours, watching history disappear beneath your feet in real time. Keep your eyes on the cliffs nearby, because this is one of the only places where you might spot mountain goats scaling near vertical rock. Athabasca Falls, though not the tallest in the park, crashes through a narrow gorge with enough force to feel genuinely humbling. And Malign Lake, home to the famous Spirit Island, is only reachable by boat, which is exactly what makes it feel so untouched. As one of the world's designated dark sky preserves, Jasper offers something almost nowhere else can: skies completely free from light pollution, turning night into its own kind of spectacle. But if you think you've seen hidden, you haven't seen Yoho National Park yet. Tucked into the western slopes of the Rockies, its name comes from a Cree word meaning awe and wonder, and it earns every letter of that meaning. Takakau Falls ranks among Canada's tallest waterfalls, while the natural bridge, carved entirely by the Kicking Horse River, looks like something engineered rather than formed by nature. Kicking Horse Pass itself played a massive role in building the Canadian Pacific Railway, the very project that helped unite this entire country. Emerald Lake delivers one of the most iconic, postcard-perfect views in all of Canada. But the real shock waits at the Burgess Shale, where fossils over 500 million years old offer a direct window into the earliest complex life on Earth. And if solitude is what you're chasing, the trails around Lake O'Hara remain some of the most pristine, untouched paths in the entire park system. Then there's Kananaskis country, often overlooked, yet no less breathtaking, with rugged ridgelines where bighorn sheep wander freely and grizzlies occasionally make a rare appearance. When autumn arrives, the entire landscape ignites in deep reds and golds against raw rock faces. Far to the east, Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario offers an entirely different kind of beauty. Dense forest wrapped around still, serene lakes, transformed each fall into a blazing tapestry of red, orange, and yellow. Now we head somewhere that still feels genuinely untouched by modern civilization. Tucked beside Alaska in Canada's remote northwest lies Yukon, covering nearly 500,000 square kilometers of pure wilderness. This is a land of endless forests, towering mountains, and glaciers that seem to stretch forever. In winter, the northern lights paint the sky in shifting color. In summer, the midnight sun keeps daylight going for almost 24 hours straight. But Yukon's history runs just as deep as its landscape. During the late 1800s, the Klondike Gold Rush pulled thousands of fortune seekers into this frozen frontier, many of whom found something far more valuable than gold: an unshakable connection to the land itself. Paddle down the legendary Yukon River, hike through the remote Tombstone Territorial Park, or stand before the glaciers of Kluane National Park, and you'll understand exactly what that connection means. For those chasing true isolation, the Dempster Highway stretches 700 kilometers from Yukon into the Northwest Territories, built in the 1970s through some of the most brutal terrain imaginable. In winter, it transforms into a literal ice highway, the only lifeline connecting isolated northern communities to the outside world. And then, at the very edge of the map, Thor Peak on Baffin Island holds a record that sounds almost fictional: the world's tallest vertical rock drop, plunging over a full kilometer straight down. Surrounding it, Oluwatu National Park protects a landscape of glaciers and fjords that has sheltered the Inuit for centuries. This is where Canada's true north reveals itself completely raw, completely untamed. But somewhere between all this wilderness lies a quiet fishing village that feels like time simply forgot to move forward. Peggy's Cove, on the rugged shores of Nova Scotia, is home to one of the most photographed lighthouses on Earth, perched on granite boulders shaped by glaciers millions of years ago. Since 1915, that lighthouse has guided sailors through dangerous Atlantic waters, and the entire village still moves to the rhythm of the sea, colorful fishing boats bobbing gently in the harbor beneath weathered stone houses. Further north, something even more astonishing waits, something that shouldn't exist in North America at all. Lonsox Meadows is the only confirmed Viking settlement ever discovered on this continent. Over 1,000 years ago, Norse explorers sailing from Greenland landed here, marking the farthest known point of their westward expansion. Discovered only in the 1960s, the site includes reconstructed sod houses and archaeological evidence proving Europeans reached North America centuries before anyone else. Nearby, Grosmorn National Park reveals Newfoundland's ancient geological past, fjords and towering cliffs carved by glaciers, alongside exposed mantle rock thrust up from deep within the earth, a phenomenon visible in only a handful of places worldwide. This UNESCO World Heritage Site isn't just scenery, it's a direct window into how our planet was formed. Back west in Alberta, the Canadian Badlands look almost alien, jagged rock formations and towering hoodoos creating a landscape that feels borrowed from another era entirely. Beneath the surface lies one of the richest dinosaur fossil sites on Earth, layers of history stretching back millions upon millions of years. And now, for the final stretch, the Sea to Sky Highway, a road that feels less like a drive and more like a story unfolding mile by mile. It begins at Horseshoe Bay, calm coastal waters framed by distant mountains, before winding north through Squamish, proudly nicknamed the outdoor recreation capital of Canada. Here stands the Stiwamis Chief, one of the largest granite monoliths in the world, sacred to the Squamish Nation and a brutal 700-meter climb for those daring enough to attempt it. Nearby, Shannon Falls drops 335 meters down smooth granite cliffs, making it one of British Columbia's tallest waterfalls, while the more hidden Brandywine Falls plunges 70 meters into a dramatic basalt canyon formed by ancient volcanic activity. Continue north and you'll reach Whistler, a world-class mountain resort and former venue for the 2010 Winter Olympics, named after the whistling marmots that call these mountains home. Just outside town lies Garibaldi Provincial Park, named for an ancient volcano, where wildflowers blanket alpine meadows in late summer and trails like Panorama Ridge and Black Tusk deliver staggering views of glaciers and jagged peaks. But the true finale waits a little further along, the Joffre Lakes, 3 glacier-fed lakes glowing in almost unnatural turquoise, caused by fine glacial silt reflecting sunlight through the water. At the very end of the trail stands the Mathieu Glacier itself, the very source of that impossible color, a final, breathtaking reminder of just how much this land has been shaped by forces far older than human history. And finally, after all that wilderness, Canada's cities reveal an entirely different personality. Vancouver blends mountains and ocean directly into daily life, with Stanley Park's seawall offering adventure minutes from downtown. Toronto pulses with energy, from the diversity of Kensington Market to the transformed warehouses of the Distillery District, all watched over by the towering CN Tower. In the nation's capital, Ottawa, Parliament Hill stands as a symbol of governance, while in winter the Rideau Canal becomes the longest skating rink on Earth. Montreal effortlessly blends French and English culture, its cobblestone streets in Old Montreal feeling frozen in time, even as its music and food scenes push relentlessly forward. And finally, Quebec City, with its walled old town and the iconic Chateau Frontenac, feels less like Canada and more like a fragment of Europe accidentally dropped into North America. So that's the answer to the puzzle we opened with. A country defined not by one identity, but by dozens of contradictions living side by side. Ancient glaciers beside modern cities, Viking ruins beside dinosaur bones, silence beside spectacle. If this journey through Canada's most extraordinary secrets opened your eyes to just how strange and layered this country really is, let me know in the comments which place shocked you the most, and check out the next video, because what you're about to see next might be even harder to believe.